Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Darla Bardine. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of the National Network for Youth, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar that we're co-hosting with our members and dear friends and partners, the National Runaway Safeline. So today's webinar topic is Youth Homelessness Data and Trends, Insights from the National Runaway Safeline. I'm going to go over some housekeeping. Please introduce yourself in chat. If you're willing, please put your name, your pronouns, what organization you're with, where you're located in the world, and throw in an emoji to tell us how your day is going so far. Also, we're sure you will have questions throughout the presentation today. Please put your questions in the Q&A box. That makes it easier for us to keep track of the questions, to not have the questions in the chat box. Also, the webinar slides and a recording of this webinar will be available on our website next week after the webinar is over. Also, when we send you a follow-up email after the webinar and at the end of this webinar, there is going to be a survey. Please take a couple of minutes to fill out that survey so that we can continue to improve for next time. I see folks are starting to introduce themselves in chat. I already introduced myself. You're going to be hearing from Brad Potts and Amanda Whitlock from National Runaway Safeline. And this is what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk a little bit about who the National Network for Youth is. Then you're going to learn about National Runaway Safeline. They're going to talk about youth homelessness data and trends, youth homelessness prevention needs and opportunities. And if there's time, there'll be time for some discussion at the end. So a little bit about the National Network for Youth. If you are not familiar with us, we have been around since 1974. We're on a mission to transform systems so that no young person in America experiences homelessness. We partner with young people who have experienced homelessness and youth service providers and other partners from across the country to prevent and end youth, young adult, and young parent family homelessness. We do this through federal policy advocacy, sharing power with young people with lived expertise, and advancing community-based solutions. We are a membership organization, and so if you are not a member of the National Network for Youth, we would love for you to join us as a member. You can learn more about membership at our website. It is a great way to connect with peers, to gain expert guidance, and stay updated on funding and policies affecting youth homelessness. We also do provide discounted consulting services to our members as well. Also, we want to make sure that everybody knows about our I Am Here Vital Document legal hotline for young people. This is free, dedicated, state-specific legal assistance for young people who are experiencing homelessness, who need help obtaining a valid government ID, a birth certificate, social security card, or any documents that are needed to obtain an ID or a license. We are open on Wednesdays, but you can text or call and leave voicemails at any time. And we're proud to partner with Baker McKenzie in providing this vital document hotline. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to Amanda and Brad.
Thanks, Darla. Truly appreciate N4Y hosting us today. As Darla indicated, we're going to talk about youth homelessness data and trends today. Next slide. And we are with the National Runaway Safeline, and I want to spend some time making sure people are familiar with who we are before we get into the data. So next slide. So NRS has existed since 1971. We were originally Metro Help, then the National Runaway Switchboard, and we're now the National Runaway Safeline. I do want to just take a second to recognize even that name is probably a little outdated, but we're not ready to change it yet. But that is who we are today, is the National Runaway Safeline. And our mission is to keep America's runaway, homeless, and at-risk youth safe and off the streets. And this is accomplished by providing the services that you see here: crisis intervention, information and referral lines, connection to service providers. We have a messaging service for youth to be able to reach their parents and parents to reach youth. We have our Home Free program. We also offer a number of prevention and education materials on our websites, and we have training opportunities, and then we have our youth advisory board. And our youth advisory board really does work with the staff to inform all of the services I just listed above. And then NRS is overseen by an NRS governance board. Our webpage is listed here. Feel free to scan the QR code on the screen if you want to go directly to NRS, and also make sure you follow us online. Next slide. So the National Runaway Safeline operates 3 crisis lines. Most of you are probably most familiar with 1-800-RUNAWAY, the first one listed here. It is our largest hotline. It is the one that has been running the longest. But in addition to 1-800-RUNAWAY, we also have a information and referral line here in Illinois called CCBYS, the Illinois Comprehensive Community-Based Youth Services Line. And then we have our newest national hotline, which is our mental health information and referral safe line. So I'm going to pass it over to Brad, who's going to talk a little bit more about CCBYS. Next
Okay,
slide.
thanks, Amanda. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So for those who may not know, CCBYS stands for Comprehensive Community-Based Youth Services, and it operates in Illinois, and it's an intentional collaboration and integration of community service providers funded by the Illinois Department of Human Services to ensure youth ages 11 through 17 with status offenses, so meaning youth who have run away, are homeless, or perhaps are being truant, or also youth with a high risk of involvement in the child welfare or juvenile justice system. Again, also youth who have run away, who may have been described as being out of control or who have been locked out by their parents, to make sure that these youth have needed services and a safe place to stay. So currently, this is a network of 28 agencies that provide statewide coverage to ensure youth at risk of homelessness in Illinois have an identified service provider that can assist 24/7, and they show up where the youth is and work with them to locate housing and support and provide ongoing connection to community resources. So the National Runaway Safeline operates the information and referral line for CCBYS. And so we're the point of entry for thousands of youth, hospitals, police, other community providers each year who need help connecting youth with the local provider in their area. CCBYS serves nearly 6,000 youth a year, and it provides shelter for nearly 400 youth who don't have an identified immediate support system. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so MOCA is our newest information and referral safe line, specifically focused on mental health information and referrals. Since it started in March of 2025, we've had youth from 33 states reach out to support on the MOCA line. In year 2025, 94% of youth reached out to us via text as opposed to calling. Around 30% of the youth were 15 or younger, with 54% being between the ages of 16 to 18. So you can see the mix of youth reaching out from home, the streets, or schools, or some of them just didn't volunteer to give out where they are located. Important to keep in mind that all of the hotlines that we operate are confidential, and we only collect information as it's volunteered by the youth. So I'm going to pass it back to Amanda to explain how 1-800-RUNAWAY came to be before we share more information about the program and some of the trends that we're seeing.
Thanks, Brad. Next slide. So we've covered our first agenda item on who is NRS. And like Brad said, before we get into the data about 1-800-RUNAWAY, we want to just take a moment to make sure everyone's aware of why 1-800-RUNAWAY exists and understands it is the National Runaway and Homeless Youth Communication System funded by FISB. Next slide. So reports from HUD and Chapin Hall estimate that about 4.2 million young people ages 13 to 25 experience homelessness every year. And it's important to remember that no every youth experiencing homelessness or episodes of running away is on the streets and not attending school. There's no one profile for youth who experience homelessness in America. Next slide. And of that 4.2 million, this breaks down to 1 in 10 young people ages 18 to 24 and 1 in 30 ages 13 to 17 experience homelessness each year. And it's estimated that 74% of all the youth 13 to 25 that experience homelessness were unhoused for longer than a month. So you can see here that according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that's 150,000 youth who experienced homelessness on a single night in January 2024, 10% increase in unaccompanied youth from 23 to 24. And you can see here this alarming stat on how youth can survive on the street. 24 to 27% exchange sex for money and a place to stay. So I think this really makes it clear about the need for a system to ensure kids and youth aren't on the streets and suffering those unfortunate consequences that arise when youth are on the street any longer than absolutely necessary to find safety. So the next slide. So I shared some national stats. So what's being done on the national level to address this? As you can see here, we have the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. That is the federal response to youth homelessness. This act funds community-based organizations to provide housing and supportive services to young people in need, to prevent young people from experiencing trafficking and identifying services for those who have, and connecting young people to education, employment, and other services to get them stable. This act is what funds the National Communication System for Runaway and Homeless Youth, known as 1-800-RUNAWAY, and it also funds the basic centers, the emergency shelters, street outreach, transitional shelters, and maternity group homes that make up the system of care here in America for youth who are experiencing homelessness. So, now that we all understand the scope of the youth homelessness, the national response, I'm going to turn it over to Brad to give you a little bit more information about what is 1-800-RUNAWAY if you're not familiar. Next slide, and back to you, Brad.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. So as Amanda mentioned, 1-800-RUNAWAY is the runaway and homeless youth national communication system working to connect youth under the age of 24 to supports and systems. The goal of 1-800-RUNAWAY is to ensure that youth have access to services in community-based settings. So we accomplish this by providing information and referrals through our hotline and online services and providing prevention, training and education, and also Youth Hope Month every November. You can see here that we have our own webpage, 1-800-runaway.org, and this is separate and unique from the agency webpage, nationalrunawaysafeline.org. So feel free when you get a chance to look it up on your phone to see what youth see when they reach out to us via their phone. And online is the most frequently reported referral source for us. And the next slide, please. Okay, so from the website, youth and concerned adults can reach out to us via phone call, through chat, through text, email, or forum. We know that not every youth has a phone or a cell service that they can call us, and maybe texting is not an option, but with a connection to Wi-Fi, they can always reach out to us via chat. Text and chat make up the most frequent method for youth contacting 1-800, followed by frequency in phone calls. In 2025, 75% of youth crisis contacts that shared how they heard about NRS indicated they found us online. 10% was word of mouth, and 8% had called us before. Only about 3% heard us from a social service provider and 1% from a school. So hopefully what that means is after today's presentation, you have the information you need to make sure all youth are aware that we're here 24/7 to help. So the next slide, please. Okay, so one of our newest initiatives is turning NRS's database of over 6,000 resources public facing. So that allows youth and family to find resources on their own if that's what they'd like to do. We launched this in December of 2025, and as of this presentation, the database on our site has been viewed over 1,800 times. We're always adding new resources to our database to make sure that we have resources in every area of the country. So if you don't see your agency listed, or if you know of an agency that you're like, that should probably be in the database, don't hesitate to reach out to me or to use the link on the NRS webpage to be added. And I think at some point we'll have my email listed on one of these slides, and also I think it's going to be in the chat box. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so in addition to youth reaching out via messages and calls and using our database, we also offer the Home Free program. Now, this program provides a free bus ticket to qualifying youth ages 12 through 21. In 2025, we supported 532 youth to reunify with family or to reach safe and stable housing. Importantly, youth must call 1-800-RUNAWAY to access the program, as there is an eligibility and screening process. At some point, they would need to call us, even if they reach out to us via text or chat. Most important in the screening process is to ensure that the youth aren't being trafficked. We confirm that the youth has a stable relationship with the identified adult that they're going to be going to, and we require verification of that relationship. If there's an identified housing resource that they would be going to, like a shelter or a transitional living program, we need to confirm that that shelter or TLP has space and that they have accepted the youth. And go ahead to the next slide. So in addition to youth accessing our resources via our database or by contacting us, we also provide outreach materials for schools, for community centers, police stations, any youth serving space to ensure that the community is aware of 1-800-RUNAWAY and that youth know that they can access our services. On the 1-800 website, you can see the variety of printed materials we have, such as brochures, flyers, outreach cards, bookmarks, and that's available to any partner at no cost nationwide. You can download them from our website, or you can email me at resources@1800runaway.org. So that's the email I was talking about. You can reach out to me anytime, and I can send out printed materials in English, and we also have some Spanish language materials as well. Also on this page are outreach materials that can be shared on social media. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so in addition to helping providers with sharing how to contact 1-800, we also have our Let's Talk Runaway Prevention curriculum. This curriculum is a free, evidence-based, and interactive for group settings intended to educate young people about alternatives to running away, as well as to build life skills so that youth can resolve problems without resorting to runaway or unsafe behavior. The curriculum can be used in any number of settings, including schools, youth groups, community centers, and after-school clubs. It's primarily designed for youth ages 10 to 20, but it can be adapted to other age groups. Okay, so with all that in mind, I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda to talk about our national awareness campaign that happens every November.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, next slide.
Hopefully everyone found that super helpful to know exactly what 1-800-RUNAWAY does. We're not just a hotline. We offer a lot more. to really support not only partners, parents, caregivers, and youth. Um, and next slide, as Brad mentioned, every November, NRS leads National Youth Hope Month. It's a national campaign, and the goal really is to increase outreach, prevention, and education of youth homelessness. The campaign has three goals, and that is to raise awareness of youth homelessness, educate communities about how they can get involved, and increase the visibility of services and resources within the runaway and homeless youth continuum of care. And we hope that you partner with us this year. And if you're ready to partner, you can scan that QR code that you see on your screen. We're waiting federal approval for the campaign toolkit. They have the draft, but we're ready to go in live with that toolkit, hopefully in July, and it will have downloadable assets and other campaign materials. So if you register, we will be able to send you out that campaign toolkit once it's federally approved. So we've explained why we exist, who we are, what we do. Let's talk about some trend data that comes out of 1-800-RUNAWAYS. So next slide. Okay. So next slide again. So in 2025, we provided support to nearly 25,000 separate contacts. Most of them reached out to us via calls to our hotline, about 49%, followed by chat and text, 44%. Nearly 20,000 of those contacts came directly from the youth themselves. As Brad mentioned, youth most frequently reach out to us via chat and text, about 49%, and then that's followed by calls at 43%. As Brad mentioned, we collect information only on a volunteer basis, so it's a trauma-informed data collection, which means we ask questions to help resolve the crisis at hand. We do not require any youth to answer a question they're not comfortable answering, and all of our hotlines are confidential and that we're mandated reporters, but otherwise we do not collect identifying information for the youth. If information is not volunteered during the conversation, at the end of the call, we may ask a youth if they're interested in answering some additional demographic questions, just so we can understand who is calling us and where the need is coming from. But again, it is completely voluntary. So of the information that we are able to collect, 80% of the youth crisis contacts in 2025 were youth themselves, 8% parents, 5% were adults, and 3 reported being a relative. You can see the status of the youth at the time of the contact, with over 5,000 youth self-identifying as being homeless, kicked out, or had run away. 44% of the 12,000 youth that shared their location were at home. And you can see that was over 5,000 youth and another 4,000 volunteered not being at home, identified street, friend, relative, or shelter. So as we talked about before, not every kid is on the street. They may be with a friend, they may be with a relative, or they just don't share where they are, but they are calling, letting us know that they need help. Next slide. This slide highlights the top 10 issues that were identified for those 25,000 contacts and the natural supports and community supports that were discussed. When a youth calls 1-800-RUNAWAY, our goal is to help them identify the resources that exist and help them determine their plan on how they want to address the presenting concern. So you can see the top 10 issues identified in 2025 here on the left. And we do not simply identify just one issue. So these aren't mutually exclusive. And you can see the frequency of these concerns with a youth calling us. So youth may call and identify family dynamics and mental health and concerns with their service provider all in one call. So again, those aren't mutually exclusive. But what's new for NRS in 2025 is we broke out housing from economics. That used to just sit as an economic factor. We really wanted to start to understand of the kids volunteering information, how many of it was truly separate from economics and was housing. We just separated this in November of 2025, and within 2 months, over 1,200 times housing was identified as an issue, and it hit the top 10 for the year. Again, keeping in mind it was only live for 2 months, but it hit the top 10 in less than 2 months. And then on the top right, you can see the total number of natural supports and community support options that were discussed. We do our best to offer warm handoffs and encourage youth to let us help make that connection. Often youth aren't ready to make the connection or they feel confident they can make it themselves. There's just not one solution for youth, but we really do our best to have that phone call if it is maybe an aunt who can be a supportive caregiver if the home situation is untenable for that child, to make that phone call with the youth to that aunt. If it's a transitional living program, calling and explaining what we know about the youth, how we can help support that transition so that they're not having to cold call and start over again, is where we really try to be that support for youth. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we exist to ensure that kids are aware of the other resources within the runaway and homeless continuum of care. So 4,000 times we provided direct referrals to our partners that have emergency shelters, transitional housing, mother and infant care, street outreach, drop-in center, and housing. Again, really trying to work to ensure that when youth are ready to come off the streets, that we are there to provide that handoff. Okay, next slide. And if you have questions, pop them in the Q&A. We'll do our best to get to them. On this slide, I know from the introductions, people are all over the country. So if you're interested in how many youth in your state reached out to NRS, again, they have to tell us that's where they are in order for us to track them that way. But you can scan this QR code and see a breakout by the top counties in your state. You can see the utilization of the Home Free program, kids that are coming to your state, the top reasons that youth in your state reached out. And you can also see some other demographics about age, race, for the kids in your state. So our last area of focus for today is how we used 5 years of data. So I just covered what the data looks like for 2025. We're now going to look at some trend data from 2023 to 2025. We partnered with the American Institutes for Research and analyzed data from over 100,000 contacts who interacted with NRS from 2019 to 2023. And we stood up a report that not only looked at trends, but what we can do together to prevent youth needing our resources. So next slide. So what we learned is that every year since 2023, NRS has seen an increase of 11% increase in youth crisis contacts. 2025 was the first year chat and text was the most popular form of contact, and the number of contacts ages 18 to 21 has increased from 25% in 2023 to 32% in 2025. I don't think anybody in this call working with youth is shocked to hear that kids are not able to be completely independent and function independently at age 18, especially with the current kind of national trends with economics and pressure on family dynamics, with families having less resources to support that launch. Most of us on this call probably didn't just walk out the door at 18 and were completely independent. So we are definitely seeing that increase in that age group. And then the number of contacts reporting youth homelessness has grown from 13% of our contacts to 16%. Next slide. So some additional 3-year trends is that the number of contacts reporting an issue with economics rose from 26% in 2023 to 31%, and the number reporting a mental health concern additionally rose. What we found interesting, and those of you on the call may or may not, is that contacts reporting issues with their social service provider doubled in percentage from 10% to 20% from 2023 to 2024. I think all of us know that we are trying to serve more youth with less resources, and that there are less social service providers than there was previously. And what we're seeing here on the hotline is more and more kids calling and talking about that just felt reality for them, that I'm not getting a call back. I don't know where to go. The place I used to go is, no longer taking new youth, et cetera, et cetera. But we are seeing a huge increase in kids just really having concerns with a local service provider through no fault of any provider. Again, just really that national felt pressure and impact of some funding cuts. Natural supports fell from 58 to 51. Again, not cause and effect, but I think we all know that we're all strapped. So it's not a surprise that youth are feeling like their natural supports are also less available to them in recent years. And housing and community support increased from 36% in 2023 to 45% in 2025. It really was talking about the need for housing. So next slide. So like I said, we looked at this data and we wanted to understand what can all of us do with it, about it, and together with the American Institute for Research, we came up with, next slide, a prevention report that we published in 2025. It was shared during a workshop at the FISBE RIDE conference in December. So if you were there, you might have got a copy. And for those that haven't seen it, you can scan this QR code and it'll take you to our webpage where you can download the full report and the 2-pagers that we have for recommendations for youth, providers, and policymakers. So 3 different target populations that we wanted to provide very specific ideas and suggestions about what they could do to help with youth homelessness. You can also email us and we can send out professionally printed copies if you want to share this with your local policymakers. And we have professionally printed 2-pagers if you have a youth advisory council or a youth advisory board and you want to utilize them and following on some of these recommendations again in whatever way you think this material would be helpful. It's available online and we can also send it out to you. But what we're going to do next is review those highlights together. So next slide. So we aim to address 3 research questions. What were the characteristics, experiences, and challenges of young people? What was the homeless risk status of young people? And then what were the options for referrals? And supports, and we will want to look for patterns within those groups by examining characteristics, experiences, challenges, and see kind of what varied based on homelessness risk status. Next slide. So what did we find? Next slide. So what we found is that most young people are still at home when they reach out to NRS, as you kind of saw in the 25 and the 23-25 data. That's been consistent. Those who were not yet homeless were more likely to be younger and female, were experiencing human trafficking, mental health issues, child maltreatment, family conflict, juvenile crime, and peer issues. So if a youth calls us and we have a concern about human trafficking, they're often not calling us because they're homeless. They're calling us because they're stressed about a relationship dynamic that's happening. And then we start to learn more about what's happening in that reality for that youth. Those at imminent risk of homelessness reported higher levels of emotional abuse and family dynamics. And compared to youth that were homeless, those that were at imminent risk of homelessness were more likely to discuss connections with family, friends, and other adults to solve the identified issue. Again, if you just kind of take a second, think about that, that just makes a lot of just logical sense. That if you're homeless, you're calling it about immediate need, and that connection with family, friends, and other adults may no longer be an immediate viable resource. But for those kids that were at imminent risk of homelessness, we found that that really is the opportunity when there's still that connection with family, friends, and other adults, that they still see that connection, that we can help them see the connection and then reach out and form those connections. And the findings that came out of our data really were in line with the literature on the predictors of youth homelessness. And then the solutions to challenges in young people's family and social environments could help to resolve the issues that could immediately lead to homelessness. So at 1-800-RUNAWAY, we don't offer a magic wand or a solution. Often the kids and the youth and the adults and the caregivers, they have their own solutions. And talking with our crisis team, they can start to identify and see like, oh, this is an option, this is a solution. And then again, we just really help them identify that next step. Okay, next slide. So as I said, the goal was not to only understand the who and the need, but to suggest practical recommendations about what can be done. Our Youth Advisory Board worked with the American Institute for Research and the staff to review the results, discuss the findings, and they had input into all of these recommendations. So next slide. So we're going to go through those recommendations for policymakers, um, practitioners like ourselves, and as well as youth. And as you have any questions in the next couple of slides, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. It looks like we're going to have some time to hopefully answer any questions that have come up, but this is really an opportunity to weigh in as well. So the report identified these specific recommendations for how policymakers could help prevent youth homelessness. We thank NN4Y and others in the room that engage in these activities on behalf of us providers and really work to ensure youth voice. So what was suggested was supporting local cross-sector partnerships, developing local system or asset maps, ensuring that local youth homeless systems are adequately resourced. We know that that's, no small challenge. And what can state and federal policymakers do to prevent youth homelessness is supporting that development of public awareness campaigns to increase the awareness of state and federal services and resources. Oftentimes, youth call us and they truly are in a service desert. They had no idea. They have no idea, and we aren't even aware of a resource. But oftentimes, they call us and they're not even aware of the resources in their own backyard. And that's where we turn that resource database externally facing is we want people to be able to self-serve and find that resource that's there and local. Almost no nonprofit has the ability to advertise, right? Like that's just not in any of our budgets. And often when we're stressed and then we're in crisis, we're not able to access the most logical parts of our brain and problem solve. But once kids call us and we are able to help them, kind of see the issue, identify the problem, narrow down their priorities, they may or may not be able to identify something in their, backyard, but we definitely work to help. So there really is a need to make sure that, you know, how do we help nonprofits make sure those that need them know they exist? Obviously, destigmatizing seeking help is a huge issue at the national level. And we know that permitting the expansion of existing policy solutions, such as Family First Prevention Services Act, is something that would ensure families have access to resources sooner than later. So again, this is now over a year old. So please put in the Q&A if you think there's additional things that all of us in this community should be thinking about and talking with our policymakers about here in 2026. Okay, so moving on to our next slide is youth serving professionals. So you can see here that what can youth serving service providers do to prevent youth homelessness? We can ensure that young people and their families can access prevention and early intervention services. We can understand the local landscape of resources and make strategic warm handoffs. We often let our youth know, like, if you're not ready for us to do that warm handoff with you and you want to call yourself, if they tell you no, they can't help, can you ask them for at least 2 or 3 other people that might, so that they're never hanging up that phone without another resource. We also want to, as youth service providers, ensure that programs serving young people incorporate youth-centered policies and supportive services. Our YAB speaks often, frequently, and loudly, as they should, about how do all of us make sure that we're centering their perspective in the programs that we run, we operate. And not only how do we operate, how do we market, how do we talk, assessments. There's just so many areas that the youth voice can really help inform us as practitioners to ensure that we're providing them the best service and we're ensuring that they, as word of mouth, are able to send the next kid in for help and resources because they have their own network of referrals. Often I did a listen in. And it was a kid calling from a laundromat in Florida who had unfortunately, went there for work and ended up without an ID, ended up without housing. And it was a kid in a laundromat who had shared, hey, there's this home free program that you can learn more about. So we do often hear from kids where they're referring to themselves. And I'm sure all of you on this call have the same thing where they ran into somebody who said, hey, you should go over here and they can help you. And we know that um, youth serving professionals, as I said, we're all strapped, we're all busy, we're all overwhelmed, and we don't have a lot of funding. So it may feel like, yeah, these are nice to have. But again, our hope is today to really talk about what we all would like to be doing, separating the challenges with doing it. So again, feel free to add additional, just kind of high level things that all of us can be doing. To support and help. Okay, so the last one is, what do these findings mean for youth and young adults? So next slide. Stop one. Okay, so again, when interacting with community-based programs, our youth advisory board really is encouraging young people to reach out to local service provider for housing supports and not be afraid to ask for help, and to be very clear with service providers about their specific needs. Our young people obviously enjoy being on the youth advisory board or council, but their suggestion for other youth who have experienced or are at risk of homelessness really is to be part of the solution in joining local youth advisory boards and councils. And when looking to improve their state and local youth homeless system, youth suggested that they share community-based resources with friends. They join technical assistance calls hosted by nonprofit organizations. They network with peers and colleagues on these calls at community events and through advocacy space. And our youth really just always resonate that the experience of homelessness can be different for everyone. And they talked about the importance of making sure that youth that are showing up in advocacy spaces don't assume every youth has the same experience that they do. And they're really able to share, like, from my experience, X, from my experience, Y. And we all know that homelessness looks different for every youth. And we want to make sure we have a wide variety of youth experiences and youth voice when we're engaging with youth and young adults in our advocacy and prevention space. So we have some time for questions. I'm looking in the chat. Does anybody see anything that we want to make sure we address? Because if we don't get your questions today, we can be sure to answer them in the follow-up material. So I'm not seeing anything, but if you do, I think the takeaway for today's conversation on the next slide is that we all have a role to play in preventing youth homelessness. Brad and I hope that you found today's session hopeful in understanding the needs seen by NRS and what each of us can do to help prevent homelessness. Hopefully, we've met the goal of increasing your awareness of how NRS and 1-800-RUNAWAY can help prevent and support a youth and providers working in the runaway and homeless space. And hopefully, either through the report that you can download, we can email it to you, or the highlights I covered here, you see an opportunity to help policymakers as well as you're advocating not only for your program, but in general. The youth that we serve. And then I will end again with the next slide. Just again, another call out to partner with us for Youth Hope Month. It costs nothing, but provides you with the resources that you need to help you participate and be active on social media with your policymakers, with the media, with your youth advisory or advocacy groups. And our goal is to partner in all states, light up landmarks in all 50 states, and have local leaders issue proclamations of Youth Hope Month as we work to raise awareness of youth-specific homelessness programming and raise awareness of the service providers working to support the youth. So lastly, on the next slide is if you have any additional information that you want to share with us, if you have questions for us specifically, I, as the CEO for the National Runaway Safeline, I have my email here. I am available. As Brad identified, he's a resource coordinator and he's our crisis services supervisor. And he is there to maintain that resource database, provide the packets of information if you want that professionally printed material to hang in your service area. We are here to help in any way we can. So I'm going to pass it back over to Darla, who we again truly appreciate inviting us into the space today.
There were a couple questions in the Q&A. I, I hate to go back, but is that all right if we just answer a couple of these,
Yeah,
Amanda?
Go for
I
it.
was
Well,
I was going to
okay.
ask you these questions. So,
Okay.
one is, would we be able to allow our McKinney-Vento liaisons to help facilitate this process? And they're talking specifically about the home free transportation.
So I don't know if they can put in the chat. Tell us more about what do you mean by facilitating the process? Because as Brad mentioned, the youth have to call 1-800-RUNAWAY. And Brad, do you want to talk a little bit more? You deal with it every day.
Yeah. So, a youth can have a supportive adult on the call with them. So, for instance, if McKinney-Vento liaison wanted to start the call and maybe the youth is right there with them, maybe the youth needs some support, that would be fine. We do need to eventually talk to the youth, however. We will need to speak with them one-on-one, or perhaps with support of a school counselor or McKinney-Vento liaison or whoever. So yes, they can help facilitate, but we will need to talk to the youth. Hope
And
that
how,
answers the question.
yeah, I think that's, well, I learned something, Brad. So thank you. And how do you ask about the presenting problem being economics versus housing?
So Brad, I'll cue it up for Brad to answer more specifically. So we never ask a youth like, "Hey, what's your problem? What's going on? Is it economics? Is it this? Is it that?" So these are like in the background categories that our staff are able to select as a youth is talking. So if a youth calls us and it's like, "Hey, I'm on the streets and this is what's happening in my household," and blah blah blah, like whatever is coming out and they're sharing with us, we on the back end are doing some data collection, but Brad, do you have a more specific answer about that question? Because before, if they said housing, it just went in the economics bucket, but now it's separate, correct?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I think part of that was just distinguishing a youth might not identify as in need of housing, but they might need other things. I mean, it might be basic needs. Another factor might be they might just not they might not identify as being unhoused. They might be living with they might be couch surfing, but clearly they also do need some support or maybe even eventual housing. So yeah, I would say economics is a broader category, and like being in need of housing would be a little bit more specific within that umbrella, if that makes sense.
And the final question I see is, will NRS continue to operate the CCBYS hotline with the program transition to DCFS?
So yeah, so at this point, we are told for FY27 that everything should operate the same. Our conversation with ICOI, so we're a subrecipient of that award. ICOI here in Illinois is the primary facilitator of that service, and they will be up for a 3-year rebid on their contract in 27. So again, I think there's a lot up in the air, a lot of anxiety in Illinois about what this means because it is a pretty efficient and pretty capable system of care for kids in Illinois so that no kid is, stranded. There literally is an adult anywhere across the state that will go pick up a youth from the police, from a hospital, from the park, from a school, and really work to knock on those doors and get caring and appropriate caregiver to let them in while they work out the issue, and or work with them um, to find stable housing beyond that. So all I can say is, as of yesterday, I am told yes, and I am told that more to come. So, but yes, in Illinois, that system is moving from IDHS to IDCFS, which is our child welfare system.
Okay, super helpful. Well, we are getting, I don't think there's any more questions, Brad, or I think that's it, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But we're getting a lot of love for what you all shared today, Brad and Amanda, in the chat. A lot of thank you. Folks have a lot more clarity in terms of what you do and your process and how you operate. So that's, hey, that was the goal, right? So,
That was the goal. And our
yeah.
2025 data report is waiting federal approval. So some of the 23 to 25 trends I shared with you is like you're the first people publicly to see that. And as soon as I have federal approval to publish that on our webpage, it will be there. I know I've heard in my tenure with NRS that a lot of people do use our data as they're writing grants. So again, as soon as I can make that publicly available, I will. It'll be on our website. But for now, you can reference the data in this slide. Back to you, darling.
Yes, thank you. Well, this is why we love partnering with our amazing friends and members, National Runaway Safeline. They do such amazing work, and I think they do a lot more work than folks realize. So I really appreciated you guys taking the time, really sharing all the fullness of what you're doing. Please stay connected to us. If you love this webinar, join our network. Make sure you're on our newsletter list. This is a summary of just some of our work around membership, our training and consulting. We do a lot of federal policy work. We're happy to help you set up meetings with your members of Congress to educate them about key issues. And here's all of our email addresses. Please reach out. And again, a thank you to Amanda and Brad. Thank you all for taking the time to join our webinar today. Like I said, that you're going to get slides, recording, and a survey. Please fill out the survey. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your Wednesday and week. Bye, everyone.